Hello, my name is Harrison Pitt. I am a fellow at the New Culture Forum, and welcome to an unusually somber but nevertheless resolute episode of Deprogrammed, filmed the day after the political murder, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, one of the leading conservative commentators in the United States. I am joined by three young men whom I admire deeply: Connor Tomlinson, my trusty co-host and one of the leading contributors at Courage Media; Charlie Downs, campaigns director at Restore Britain; and Lewis Brackpool, the head of Restore Britain's Whistleblowing and Investigations Unit. Gentlemen, welcome. Charlie Kirk was shot through the neck yesterday. Connor, Elon Musk is calling the left the party of murder. Would you go along with that?
This is a result of borderline genocidal rhetoric being shouted by mainstream Democrat politicians, by MSNBC and CNN, who have acted like Radio Rwanda in America for the last decade, ever since Trump descended the golden escalator. They repeatedly call their opponents fascists and Nazis, the kind of moral nadir of the post-war political and moral order. And so if you're going to feed the anxiety that Trump and all of his supporters are on the precipice of plunging America into a fascist dictatorship, and that the ultimate heroes of our political moment were those who fought fascists in World War II. We all remember Punch a Nazi on university campuses back in 2015, 2016. If you're going to feed those febrile minds that narrative, then eventually someone is going to try and play hero and take someone out. And this is why we saw Steve Scalise get shot in 2016 at the Congressional Baseball game. This is why we saw a kid get run over about 2 years ago by a guy who said that he was an extremist Trump supporter. This is why we saw guy shoot during the 2020 summer of George Floyd riots, a guy in the chest who's a member of Antifa and said, "We've got a Trumper over here," killed him. This is why we saw Corey Comparator get shot during the Battle of Pennsylvania assassination attempt on Trump's life, and the subsequent assassination attempt against Trump by someone who is insane, obsessed with Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And now we've seen Charlie Kirk killed. Yeah. And all of this is a predictable consequence of the rhetoric that is coming out of politicians like Maxine Waters and Hillary Clinton, who have said, if you see Republicans in a restaurant or a gasoline station, you create a crowd, you push back on them, you make sure they're unwelcome, and that you cannot be civil with Republicans and Trump supporters and deplorables. If they pose an existential threat to your way of life, as Joe Biden said during his blood-red MAGA Republicans speech a couple of years ago, eventually someone's going to do what they did to Charlie.
Yes. And we have, in a moment of almost sort of dreadful clairvoyance, one of Charlie's last tweets was his drawing attention to the fact that the left in America, and no doubt globally, is increasingly embracing a culture of political assassination. And he was pointing to some data, some polling data garnered through Fox News that showed that we're talking about sort of febrile people, talking about violent-minded individuals, the sort of people who will either make excuses for a political murder like this, or the sort of people who will celebrate it, and indeed, sort of people who may even feel emboldened to commit these sorts of murders. These are not sort of fringe figures on the modern left. The data that Charlie was drawing attention to then showed that as many as 48% of self-described left liberals in the United States think it would be somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk. 55% think it would be somewhat justified to murder Donald Trump. No doubt there'll be lots of overlap with the amount of people who think that this is justified. We've seen the way in which people are celebrating it on Blue Sky, on Twitter, on other outlets. We're talking here about people who have been brainwashed by the legacy media and by the West's galaxy of NGOs into losing their humanity, and they've embraced a culture of violence, assassination, and sort of demonic destruction of everything good.
Yeah, I mean, what is there to say? The video of his murder in front of the crowd of, I think, 3,000 people, including his wife and children, is one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. And I haven't been able to get it out of my head. And Charlie Kirk, was not somebody that I was ever really a fan of. Like, I never really watched his content religiously or followed him particularly closely. He was one of those people who, for the time that I've been politically conscious, I've always kind of been aware of, as I think we probably all have.
As part of the space.
Yeah, and he was kind of one of these, he was part of the furniture, really. He was a real kind of, one of the leading figures on the American right. I mean, that's sort of his whole brand, was being the kind of mainstream family values Christian conservative. And it's just truly, I mean, I can't put it into words the way it makes you feel to see somebody who is, so ordinarily charismatic, and he's in the glitz and glamour of politics and media. He's on his on the set of his show talking about whatever the news of the day was, to watch them be so mercilessly murdered in front of so many people in such a public way. I wonder what this represents from a historical perspective. I wonder how this moment will be remembered, because it does certainly feel as though we're living in history at this moment. This is a very significant moment. I wonder whether the style of politics that Charlie Kirk represented, which is in my mind a kind of 2010s, post-Trump, mainstream centre-right conservatism, a values-based, debate-based, free marketplace of ideas type of right-wing politics. I wonder whether the death of Charlie Kirk represents the death of that style of politics. Because I think, Connor, you said that with his death, that kind of marks the end of, of the Charlie Kirks of this world being kind of...
if you kill Charlie Kirk,
right.
you won't get any more Charlie Kirks.
No.
Because John Doyle had a tweet about this. He said they killed the last guy who was actually interested in changing their minds.
And so where do we go from here? That's what I can't help but wonder.
Well, we'll get into this. I'd like to ask you very quickly, Lewis, and I hope I'm not declaring anything that you've not said publicly before, but I think that in your teenage years you did actually used to be a communist of some kind. I don't think you ever inhabited the kind of psychological headspace that would have motivated someone to do something like this. But can you shed any light on the resentment that fundamentally drives that form of politics? Because I should enter here that Stephen Crowder has recently reported that apparently, according to a source who has insider knowledge as to the current investigation, the cartridges on the murder weapon contained sort of pro-trans sentiments and anti-fascist sentiments. So clearly we are talking here about a left-wing political assassination. What is this sort of mentality? How big a role does resentment play in that kind of mentality?
Oh, hugely. It is basically us v them, and it's very ingrained earlier on. I mean, my journey through politics very early on was because of the education system. It was, if you were a Tory, if you were right wing in any fashion, you were considered like the devil. You were considered evil because you represented ideas that were so reprehensible to your cause that was just drummed into you. Last night, I must be honest, gents, I haven't slept since this has happened. It was one of those moments where, when you're staring at the ceiling and then you don't know whether you're asleep or awake, and then you're tossing and turning throughout the night, and then you realize it's 6 o'clock in the morning. It was one of those. But last night, I think around 4 o'clock, I was seeing posts from some people that I'd followed back on my social media who happened to be on the left, open communists, and I always still do follow some communists every now and then, just to not try and understand that we're past that. We're past trying to understand them, but just to see out of curiosity, because I still read some Marxist literature. I still read, literature of that ilk, because it's history and it's all to do with that. But last night at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was arguing with someone who was posting online saying one Zionist down and things like that, and saying, Charlie Kirk represented views of misogyny, racism, using all the buzzwords in one collated fashion to almost say, yeah, he deserved it.
Yes.
And I read that, and I immediately... I stopped, unfollowed, and I sent them a message, and I was very polite, and I said, I don't tolerate that. I can't tolerate that. There's one thing having the free marketplace of ideas, but there's another thing where a man has been shot in front of and killed in front of his wife and kids, and there are people out there celebrating it. That's a mindset that I just cannot. It's a godless atheist mindset that I can't resonate with, because their morality is shaped by their environment, not by something that it's not shaped by something metaphysical that can give them morality. Morality is shaped through their politics and what they are taught from their peers. And what they're being taught by their peers is us v them.
Yes.
Enemy versus good.
Yes. And they also, if I may just say very quickly, Connor, they're also utopian suckers for the myth, for the belief in human perfectibility. And that may sound innocuous, but it's in fact very dangerous, because all of a sudden, any obstacle that you come to resent for standing in the way of that sort of grand anointed vision isn't someone who can be engaged with anymore on a sort of pragmatic human level. They are a hindrance to be annihilated. And that is exactly the us versus them mentality that you're talking about here. And those people do certainly have that very dangerous and menacing utopian cast of mind to them, Connor.
Yeah, that treatment of Charlie Kirk as a sort of ontological blockage to John Lennon's Imagine was best summed up by Van Jones, actually, the day before Charlie Kirk was killed.
CNN contributor, the moderate leftist on CNN.
Yeah, who said that Trump was only elected because of white male rage. And then after a Ukrainian refugee who, as far as I understand, worked at a pizza place and volunteered at an animal shelter and never did anything wrong, made the mistake of sitting in front of a 14-time arrested and charged black schizophrenic criminal when she was stabbed in the neck for no reason at all. And when this criminal said, "I got that white girl" multiple times, Van Jones said that Charlie Kirk is stoking racial resentment and is actually the true danger to America.
And the black man is hurting.
Yeah, the black man, the victim of this crime, is actually the criminal themselves. And this is because they believe that fundamentally all human beings are deep down equal, and that people are only violent criminals because society has failed them, and that actually it's only people like Charlie Kirk pointing out the differences in behavior and belief and outcome that are causing the crime. And therefore, if you just removed all these racist blockages to utopia, we would have it. That's the reason Charlie Kirk's dead. It's that mentality.
I'd like to say just one more thing briefly. I'd like to get this in. Some people I've noticed online, particularly in Britain, Lewis Goodall, this sort of this completely sort of
wretched regime
apologist journalist. I think he's with the newsagents nowadays, formerly that BBC or Sky News, I forget.
Emily Maitlis.
With Emily Maitlis.
Well, his wife works at the Tony Blair Institute. So.
Really? Well, there you go. There's another telling piece of intel. But he's sort of a lot of people are taking refuge in a sort of pathetic both sidesism. Oh gosh, well, the political rhetoric is being ramped up and the temperature is being ramped up on all sides, and therefore we shouldn't blame only one side of the aisle for this. And people like Elon Musk for saying that the left is the party of murder. No, this is a problem that exists across the board. It really is worth saying. I don't like the word extremist at all. I think it's a completely meaningless term, devoid of any essence or any serious content. It basically just means someone who holds an unfashionable opinion. Like if you were against human sacrifice in Aztec civilization, you presumably qualify as an extremist. It's not a particularly useful term, but let's just run with it for the moment. The right's so-called extremists tend to be not only non-violent edgelords. We're talking here about people like Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes, it should be said, there was an assassination attempt on him only 3 months or so ago because of the stochastic terrorism that groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center and the ADL were sort of ramping up against him, even though he has never called for political violence in his life. The right's so-called extremists are edgelords, and they are shunned by the mainstream right.
But by Charlie Kirk specifically.
By Charlie Kirk specifically.
They didn't like each other, and Fuentes put out a series of very dignified and conciliatory tweets saying, before we knew that Kirk had passed away, please pray for this man.
Yes.
Set aside our differences, and we have to unify now. And he
Christ.
didn't broadcast his show out of respect. So
the difference in a nutshell is that the right so-called extremists are shunned and kept at a distance for just being non-violent edgelords, whereas the left's extremists, so-called, are often embraced and certainly amplified and excused by perfectly mainstream leftists like Van Jones. And indeed Blue Sky, which was supposedly set up to be the kind alternative to X, was yesterday and today saturated with people gloating about the murder of Charlie Kirk.
Two awful examples here. Number one, it appears from the footage that someone who is waiting in line either as a spectator or to ask a question at the Utah event where Kirk was shot was cheering with his arms in the air.
Yeah, I saw that.
At the scene of the death. And then this morning, Thursday, time of release and recording, Good Morning Britain hosted Nels Abbey, who is a anti-white race grifter, who once called me racist on Times News and then blocked me, so I didn't get any right of reply.
He's blocked me as well.
Yeah, because unfortunately he's too brain dead to be receptive to criticism. But he was platformed and said that Charlie Kirk was the David Duke of the TikTok era. For our English audience, David Duke was the leader of the KKK. Why is Good Morning Britain platforming someone who amplifies the same anti-white rage rhetoric, which has likely led to some demented activist shooting Kirk dead, why are they paying him to show up and put the same genocidal, slanderous lies out against his political opponents, unless they wanted more people to die?
Well, stand by it. That's basically what it comes down to.
And I'd like to add quickly, Michael Gove said nothing.
Yep.
He was silent. He didn't push back. He didn't say anything. And what does that say?
Does a great deal. Charlie?
Yeah, well, I think that particular example shows you that conservatism as a posture, a political posture, that's not the paradigm we're living in anymore. It's not enough to just be kind of cautious and hands off. Like, I've seen a lot of people saying we are at war. Like this is war now.
You can't debate people that just want you dead.
Yeah, and this is the thing in terms of what Kirk symbolizes. I always think about how a person's story is going to end. And the Charlie Kirk story, I think many people thought he may well have been president one day. I mean,
That's what I said to him.
He had that air about him.
I was lucky enough to have a chat with him in May because he put some time aside when he came over and visited, when he was doing his Oxford and Cambridge debates, and he asked me to actually pass along some briefing notes on Lucy Connolly. And without his GB News interview, it wouldn't have been brought to the attention of the American government. So we have to thank him for that. But after an hour or two of chatting to him with a friend, we were laughing and joking, and I just said, "Well, it's always nice to sit across from a future US president."
But
he would
actually
deserved it.
The reality of the Charlie Kirk story is now that history will remember him as being a symbol of free speech ultimately, and the free exchange of ideas as a remedy to a violent solution to the differences that we have in our society. And now he's dead, and I wonder what that says about where the right now needs to go. And whether we need to adopt a more, uncompromising posture against those who oppose us, because I'm not being funny, they want us dead. Well, it could be any one of us.
Yes, and I think hopefully he shall be remembered as the option they should have taken.
Yeah.
In that way, it's worth. I brought receipts for the kind of left-wing reaction that emerged here in Britain. So, like Femi, the sort of Remain campaigner,
Jobless race communist,
decided to started on Twitter getting all sarky and smug and decided to link the whole affair, Charlie Kirk's murder, to Gaza in a perfectly shameful way. There's also a woman called Super Tansky,
Yeah. Do you know she's made multiple videos about me?
Has she really?
Yeah.
Who is she? Tell us who she is.
Oh, she's just a
Jobless.
presumably jobless, husbandless, childless TikToker who spends her days ranting about the right, the far right, on her TikTok page.
And she's British.
She is British.
And she said, I'm not being lectured on morality by GB News scumbags who are radicalizing people to the far right. Daily, I face violent threats to my life because scum like you provoke the same misogynistic, violent division and hate that Charlie Kirk did. It has consequences. Shut the F up. There she is describing Charlie Kirk, who was, as you've just said, and as we've all been saying, was a peaceful, decent, civilized American warrior who died not with a sword in his hands, but with a microphone in his hands. And that's how they choose to speak about it.
But the thing is, I mean, it's such a cliche to say this kind of thing at this point, but the left are bringing into existence the kind of right that they fear, and which doesn't actually really exist at this moment. But when you celebrate the murder of really the current form that the right has, in the mainstream figure of Charlie Kirk, when you celebrate the death of that, well, you best be ready for what comes next.
The generous solution to this, which Trump should enact, is lots and lots of people going to a mental hospital for the rest of their lives. Genuinely. Like, I'm sorry, you can't have these trans activists repeatedly shooting up schools, which Charlie was talking about when he was getting shot.
Well, Eric Kaufman has done a paper quite recently showing the overlap between liberal / progressive ideology and mental illness. And it's a huge overlap. Correlation, not causation, etc. But the comorbidity cannot be denied, right? No. And I think that's certainly part of this, because we're dealing with people here that are not, we're not on the same level. It's not a level playing field. We're not playing the game on the same terms with these people.
They think
these are mentally unstable lunatics.
They think they've been hypnotized into thinking they're on the precipice of a genocide, and so they take existential self-defensive action by just killing the last remaining people that wanted to have a conversation with them. And so now, I think lots of us who, you don't mind us leaking the group chat, boys, we reacted to this going, this could be us. Yeah. Like, we don't actually, and we don't have Charlie's security. He had decent security for the on the ground stuff. He just didn't think someone was going to snipe him from a rooftop. But we could board public transport and just get stabbed by some crazy nut job who's been like fomenting rage rhetoric in their bedroom, who doesn't like us very much and recognizes us. So we need preventative action before before something goes badly wrong. Like there basically needs to be like a Trump operation turning point where he acts like Bukele and just locks these people up, prescribes Antifa as a domestic terror organization, prescribes Black Lives Matter, who just a day before this was saying black people have a right to violence.
Yes.
Like you can't live with these people.
Straight after the murder of that poor Ukrainian girl on the bus, it was in that context that they were saying that black people have a special right to violence. 2 more quick receipts. John Sweeney,
That wretched creature is shouting at me.
Indeed. A wretched former BBC journalist was calling Rupert Lowe a fascist on Twitter just this morning. Just this morning, we'll put it on the screen, he was calling Rupert Lowe a fascist. And then also Lewis Goodall, who I've already mentioned, thought it would be a good idea to blather about how well construed in a certain way Charlie Kirk actually was. Of course, his murder was bad. We shouldn't, appalling. We shouldn't do that. But he was an extremist. Basically, just sort of doubling down on the rhetorical inflation.
Do we believe any of these people, by the way, Zoran Mandami or Gavin Newsom or AOC, who all say, well, we condemn political violence? And it's like, no, hang on a minute. You wound the ratchet to the point by calling these people Nazis and fascists, and you knew they weren't. You put a target on their backs with their rhetoric. Keir Starmer as well, saying that, I grieve the loss of Charlie Kirk. No, you don't.
Yeah.
Do we believe any of these people that are actually sad about this? I think that they're saying this to cover their backsides, basically, having fomented revolution and this climate getting an innocent man killed.
I want to ask you a quick question, Charlie, and then I want to come to you, Lois, about the sort of investigative work we should be doing on this front, like what we should be doing in practical terms, what we should be encouraging in practical terms. One of the themes that we've been touching on so far, chaps, is that the time for mainstream conservative-minded right-wing people for thinking of politics as a sort of gentlemanly game, a sort of fencing contest, and a kind of leisurely exchange of ideas is over.
Yeah.
Like if your opponents are people who differ with you on tax cuts, that's feasible. But if they differ with you on issues of civilizational importance, existential issues that they care about so much that they are willing to murder for it, or celebrate murder for it, or excuse murder for it, how should this change the way, in broad terms, in which the right operates, Charlie?
Well, I think the existential aspect of this is really important because we are again dealing with people who have a fundamentally different conception of reality than we do. These are people who are entirely morally relativistic. If you can be shown that it is politically advantageous to murder somebody, they will do so because they don't view human life as having inherent value. And that is revealed in every one of their other policy positions, whether it's abortion or assisted dying or any of these other, death worship policies that the mainstream left has, openly endorsed and embraced for a long time at this point, decades. We have to recognize that what we're dealing with here are not, we're not dealing with the loyal opposition, as it were. We are dealing with civilizational existential enemies, right? And so I think, my view for a long time has been that the right needs to be more radical. We need to embrace a radical agenda and a radical style as well, because it's just simply, it's not enough to just be conservative at this time, because to be conservative when the rubber hits the road, I think frequently just it's reduced to just wishing to preserve the status quo. And that's not what we need right now. It's certainly not what we need in Britain. I don't think it's what they need in America and across the West more broadly. Every, as it were, white country specifically needs to recognize that there is an existential battle happening right now. And it might not be a hot war yet. I mean, the murder of Charlie Kirk is certainly an example of it going hot. That this battle that we're in, which is currently it's of a political nature, it's not going anywhere, and it's only going to get worse. All the while we continue to deny the fact that we are in such a battle, because our enemies clearly think that we are. Our enemies are acting as though they are in a hot war, and I think we just need to be wise to that fact. And so, whilst I still, in my heart of hearts as an Englishman, believe in the concept of free speech and believe in the concept of the exchange of ideas being a preferable alternative to violence in the political sphere, I think we have to recognize that that's not the game we're playing anymore. And so we have to start playing to win, basically, and we have to basically have the courage of our convictions and recognize the fact that actually we're not right in some trivial or small way. We are fundamentally correct in our analysis of the situation and in our solutions that we propose on our side of the political aisle. And we can't any longer have this kind of uncertainty about our position, right? We need to have a certainty and a self-assuredness that we are on the right side of morality, right? And that our enemies are death-worshipping, murderous, hateful demons. And sure, I think, there is always going to be room for debate, and I think where that's possible, we have to have it. But actually, we also have to recognise the fact that many of our opponents are just not interested in that.
The Trump administration has power. They should use it. You would not continue to play Monopoly if the other side was stealing from the bank without consequences.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is the point. The right has to be prepared to wield power in a way that it hasn't for a very long time.
And by all means, exercise discernment while doing so. I mean, if Aaron Bastani wants to have a conversation, excellent. If Cenk Uygur, who was pretty horrified, it must be said, in praise of Cenk yesterday, he was. You could tell he was clearly quite bad, really affected by Charlie's murder. Even Ezra Klein put out quite a touching message. But these people are increasingly outnumbered by loons, and we need to be discerning between people who generally want us dead and people who do want to have a conversation. The number of people who want to have a conversation is dwindling. The number of people who want us dead is increasing, and that simply should be noted. Lewis, what sort of investigative and activist work should people be doing in aid of this civilizational war that it's becoming increasingly apparent we need to wage?
Well, as you guys know, I've sort of built my kind of, I guess, brand name as myself as trying to use Tony Blair's worst nightmare, and that is his own legislation that he brought through of the Freedom of Information Act. So I always encourage people to utilize tools that the public can use against government departments, organizations, establishments, because I do see it as everyone has a role to play, whether it be big or small. It's part of a machine, if you will. Like all of us gents around this table, I'd like to say we're all very, very good at what we do. But we each do it very, very differently, and we each do it in our own way. And we each have a role to play, but we come together and, not to quote John Lennon, and the worst person to be quoting right now, but we do come together and we strategize and we make sure that we are heading in the same mission direction. And I think now more than ever, the public needs to get involved politically. This is not the time to slack off. This is not the time to bury your head in the sand and play video games and do other things, even though I do like a video game. The problem is now is even if it's local level, council level, even if it's sending off a freedom of information request, even if it's blowing the whistle on something that you deem to see as a concern or corruption, it still adds to the machine and it still adds to the organization of everything. So what I would say and encourage is people get involved, but know that each person has a role to play. So don't be disheartened about clicks, likes, engagement, anything like that. You are playing a part in this. And you have to remember, like what you just said, Charlie, as well, that the enemy, and it is an enemy, they are not going to be kind or wavering for you. So you have to dig your heels in and continue what you need to do in order for us to continue the mission. And that is to make this country, and I guess the Western Hemisphere in general, a safer and better place to live for not just ourselves, but our kids and our grandkids. And I know that sounds quite corny in a way, but, you know, this is what we're up against.
Do you know what else I think? I mean, I think largely the left-right political spectrum is becoming increasingly blurred and obsolete in the current period. But I do also think that what we would broadly call the modern left now, again, we're not dealing with 20th and 19th century economic socialists who you can sit down and have a debate with about, the finer points of taxation and all the rest of it, right? Because, I can sit, Aaron Bastani is somebody I would consider a friend, right? I can sit across from him and I can find quite a lot of common ground. I mean, I'm, economically, I have sort of left leanings, certainly. And with those types, you can have a conversation. Yes. But the left that exists as embodied in, we don't know the identity of Kirk's murderer yet. But the politics that Kirk opposed most directly in his activist work, that form of the left has to be completely destroyed. Like we're not dealing with a kind of, again, a loyal opposition here. We're not dealing with somebody who is meeting us on our own terms. We are dealing with an underhanded, completely unscrupulous, completely amoral, without morality, without any kind of rooting in objectivity either. No conception of truth, no conception of beauty, hatred of everything that represents those things. And you can't have a conversation with that. It needs to be completely destroyed as a political force.
And crucially, and this is the unfortunate thing that many people want to hide from, the form of left that you are talking about, that is the preeminent, rising, amplified, rewarded, encouraged form
Yes,
of leftism.
and this is the
nowadays.
point. Thinking about sort of investigations and the kind of how we react to things like this, we need to, I think, it needs to be revealed the full extent to which our institutions in this country and elsewhere, the government itself, but also civil service, universities, NGOs, corporate HR, and all the rest of it. I think the public needs to see the full extent of how complete the propaganda brainwashing effort has been with this style of politics. I mean, many people who are politically engaged know that this stuff has been going on for years. They know that Coca-Cola was pushing anti-white racism. They know that for example, various other corporations have done the same thing. They know that the universities, HR and faculty are completely captured by this ideology. They know that, like all of the institutions, like the entertainment industry and everything, has been feeding these messages to the public. But I think it needs to be, the direct link needs to be shown that these people, our elites, leaders in politics, in business, in finance, in entertainment, in media, etc., they are all directly responsible for the death of Charlie Kirk. And they are all directly responsible for every other horrible thing that's happened in the name of this ideology, whether that's the school shootings by the trans lunatics in America or any number of other horrific crimes. It is the buck stops with our elites. And that's what we must always remember, because it's easy, from the perspective of our elites, it's in their interest to have the street level left and right fighting each other, right? Because they maintain control. Our ire should not be directed at those people, because they're essentially just the foot soldiers of the power structure. And until you take down the power structure, one foot soldier, they're like stormtroopers, they're like orcs. You just replace one with another and just keep throwing them and, summoning them like they're bloody, like
Demons.
enemies in a video game, right? And until you take out the central power politically, nothing's going to change.
Two quick ways you can do that. First of all, I have heard the Department of Justice is very interested in compiling a list of names and social media accounts who have been openly celebrating and glorifying Charlie Kirk's death and encouraging political violence. This is not a transgression of the First Amendment. This is encouraging political murder. If you have those, there is a link that is circulating on X that you can report people to. It's God's job to forgive. It's not ours. Ours is to not forget the people that have done this. And second of all, a sort of resurrection of the House on Un-American Activities Committee would be good. McCarthy didn't go far enough. I think we need trials, hearings, televised, on the record, of all the people that pushed this anti-white rage rhetoric and made the most febrile, perverted minds into essentially human bioweapons to go and shoot up Christian children, and it seems execute Charlie Kirk.
It should be said as well that there's no shortage of hard left violent organizations, both in America and here, that merit targeting, as well as the galaxy of NGOs that winks and nods at them, that puts targets on people's backs by publishing things like Hope Not Hate's annual State of Hate report. We've got Hope Not Hate here. We've got the ADL in the United States, Southern Poverty Law Center in the United States,
Socialist Workers' Party
here,
Muslim Council of Britain.
The Muslim Council of Britain. These are sort of white collar thugs who are well aware of the febrile minds of their foot soldiers.
They know what they're doing.
They know exactly what they're doing.
This is,
and they should be targeted too for cultivating stochastic terrorists.
What they want is what has happened to Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
When Hope Not Hate has published hit pieces on me, so ICE, right? And what they want is for me to get a bullet in the head. Like that is like, there's no kind of other, they may dress it up as, oh, well, we want you to lose your job, or, we want you to lose standing and reputation and all the rest of it. But actually, when push comes to shove, they want to see you taken out permanently. And again, that is the people that we're dealing with here.
So especially as well, in any sane society, these people consistently break the law. And in a system of two-tier justice, they are given carte blanche to do so by the likes of Lord Hermer, who worked for Searchlight magazine. At the same time, Nick Lowles was there and then went on to found Hope Not Hate. John Power's done a really good Spectator piece, actually, last week on Harry Schuckman's suspicious fake passport that, yet again, the Met Police have taken no action to. And he mentioned me in there because I reported that fake passport to the police multiple times. I got multiple crime reference numbers, and any time I tried to follow up, vanished into the system. So the likes of Hope Not Hate can slander us, put targets on our back. The likes of the Muslim Council of Britain can accuse Patrick Christis of night by night spreading Islamophobic misinformation, because they know that certain jihadists have no prohibitions against protecting the unimpeachable reputation of their Prophet Muhammad by use of the sword. But when Charlie Kirk wants to sit down and have a conversation with people, all of a sudden he's a fascist, he's a Nazi, and he needs to be taken out.
I think the positive we should take from this, because we should try and take a positive from this awful 24 hours. The positive is that it's never been more important for us and those of us in the public eye, those of us who are politically engaged, to stand up and speak the truth. Because that is what scares our enemies the most, is they are worshippers of untruth. They are worshippers of evil, ultimately, from an objective perspective. And, I think we all believe in the notion that truth and morality and beauty are things that have an objective basis. They're not just a purely kind of in the eye of the beholder thing. And that is, I think, the fundamental dividing line between, if you want to call it the left and the right now. And so it's never been more important for us to stand up and assert the fact that truth does exist and that it is worth fighting for, even if that means, you do pay the ultimate price. And I think that's how Kirk must be remembered, as being a hero, a martyr for truth.
And as Peter, our director, said very movingly on Twitter, we should, the best way we can honor him is by emulating his courage. I mean, he was someone who deliberately put himself in the lion's den. He knew the risk he was taking. He knew that he was in large part going to be addressing an audience of demented loons, many of whom were not just NPCs, but worse than NPCs, non-player characters who think of themselves as main characters, who think of themselves as really engaged citizens, who basically open their mouths and allow MSNBC and CNN to pour,
duck speak
to just pour into their minds pure sort of brainwashing propaganda that kind of riles them up and makes them likely to engage in these sorts of activities. Charlie Kirk was aware that the left was increasingly embracing a culture of political assassination, and yet he continued to go on these campuses and to try to spread the word anyway. Lewis, do you want to say something?
Yes, I'll keep it brief because of time, but we have to be aware of the gaslighting. I know, Connor, you mentioned earlier about Keir Starmer's tweet of, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk and all that. And then at the bottom saying, we must have free and open discussion without fear of political violence. And then I posted a tweet, in a bit of a rage, and I won't obviously swear, but I said, F off. It was F off. If Charlie Kirk was British, you would have locked him away.
Yeah.
And that last time I checked, it garnered 1.7 million views and 102,000 likes, which is insane. I've never seen that sort of reaction. So clearly there is an appetite of we've had enough of the gaslighting, but we have to remember when we focus on the mission, when we focus on what it is, how we're going to organise and start to push forward with everything that is happening, we have to remember that there will be organisations that have, obviously, like you mentioned about hope not hate, and that will start to gaslight and that will use ways in which to say, well, we're always on the side of free speech. We're always on the side of we're always against political violence and everything. But
Nick Lowell saying, I always spoke out against the grooming gangs.
Yeah, well, I always did this. I always did that. Take note of that. Just take note. Just have a look and just register it. You don't need to say anything, just register it. Keep it in the memory banks for now, because you are going to see a lot of that. You are going to see a lot of people on the progressive side that have cheered on people, deranged lunatics that have murdered indiscriminately people for political reasons, and they either brush it off or they will turn around and say, well, I was never against that. I was always in favour of, just free and democratic discussion. You're going to see a lot of that, and I'd like us all just to be aware of it.
I think that's the thing. We just have to know who our enemies are and never forget that. Like, the true face of the left in 2025 is, it's a bullet in Charlie Kirk's neck. That is what they stand for.
When Enoch Powell visited the United States in the 1960s, he said something very interesting. He said, all of the wealth, all the success, and all the accumulation of treasure, he's talking about America, and learning in the United States have not availed to make it metropolitan. It's not just a nowhere land. It's not just a place for the world. It is still a colony, by which he means, of course, a British colony, planted in a strange land where it did not grow. And I think the highest compliment I can pay Charlie Kirk is that when he was in Oxford a few months ago, he made a remark about Britain and his love of Britain, because he was a thoroughgoing Anglophile that was very similar to that. He said, Britain is one of the greatest countries in the history of the world. You are the country of Shakespeare, the steam engine, and Adam Smith. You defeated Napoleon, you destroyed the slave trade, you stood up to Hitler. My country, America, became great as it is because of what we inherited from you, from Britain. When I hear the slogan, Make America Great Again, I'm also hearing Return America to its British roots. And I think we can all agree, gents, that we should continue that battle on behalf of our transatlantic civilization in Charlie Kirk's name.
Yeah.
We pray for his grieving wife and family, whose last tweet, Charlie Kirk's wife's last tweet, words on X were very fitting. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble, and let us be determined and unafraid. Thank you, all three of you, very much for joining me. We continue the struggle, and thank you for joining us, and God rest the soul of Charlie Kirk.